Hi, welcome to another episode of Unmuted, where I have candid connectivity conversations with industry experts. I've got another analyst perspective for you today. I'm here with Stéphane Téral of Teral Research to discuss the reality of Open RAN and where it stands today. Some say adoption is seriously lagging, others say that's not the right way to look at it. So, Stéphane, let's find out where you land on that spectrum. So for starters, I mean, do you agree that Open RAN adoption has been slower? If so, what do you see as the biggest inhibitors right now? And if you don't agree, why do you think some people feel this way?
It has never been meant to be that way. Actually, fast adoption, in the first place. So the adoption is actually as expected for people like me who have been in this Open RAN domain for a very long time, because, the first designs popped up in 2012. Okay, so that goes way back at AT&T, actually, Domain 2.0, if you remember that, with John Donovan and Chris Rice. This is how it started, disaggregation all over the place in the network. But this one is the toughest nut to crack. So they came up with a design, remember ONAP, X-RAN Alliance, then ORAN Alliance in 2018. And this was really the kickoff on the global stage. So now, the incumbent service providers, they all knew that this could never happen overnight. Why? Because you have the existing vendors to deal with. And on top of that, the 5G cycle started, kicked in 2019. So in 2019 and 2020, we saw the wave of 5G contracts, worldwide. And as an Open RAN was not part of these RFPs. Now we are at the end of this first 5G contract cycle with more than 75% of them up for renewal. Now, there is actually Open RAN in every single RFP that we see. So you see, I'm just explaining the situation. So it was not meant to be, a fast adoption. We're just following the pattern. So the first guys who pulled the plug were the Japanese. Rakuten Mobile on the one hand, and Telecom. I'm just back from Japan, and in Japan, they don't even talk about Open RAN anymore. Why? Because it's a reality. NTT Docomo, the CTO told me, look, we got Open RAN in our 5G network since day one, 2019. So for us, we are moving on to new things like introduction of AI, for example, in the RAN. But it's a non-issue anymore. So the way the market developed was like, the Japanese kicked it off with Rakuten Mobile in the driver's seat. So we had that curve and then flatness, which was sustained to some extent by Boost Mobile and a bunch of other incumbent service providers like Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone in Europe, doing small implementations. So now with AT&T, for AT&T, it took a while to actually put everything together to adopt Open RAN in its network. So you heard about the announcement, you are very aware of it, you cover that with Ericsson. And then since that, last year, in the second half of last year, we saw the Open RAN market growing again, and now it's growing nicely. And by 2030, Open RAN will account for 30% of total RAN sales in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you present a very optimistic perspective on the whole Open RAN thing, but I do have to ask you about some of the things that are still a challenge, right? Because that's definitely what people want to hear
Yes.
about. But it is good to kind of have that little bit of a reality check. It wasn't supposed to be fast.
Yeah.
So it's going along as it should be. But how much of a barrier is multi-vendor integration in these real world deployments? And are operators underestimating the cost and time required?
So yeah, the integration is still a challenge. And that's why, on the one hand, you have service providers, Rakuten Mobile said, oh, wait a minute, this is going to be a tough development. So let's do as much as we can. While on the other hand, NTT Docomo forced its vendor to work together. And one of them, Ericsson, was not happy But you know what? The situation was you don't want to work with Nokia, Fujitsu, NEC, and Samsung. We're talking about the 5G network. Samsung is not in the 4G network at NTT Docomo. You're going to get kicked out. So, like it or not, you're going to have to do it. And I guess you haven't heard that story that much. I have actually plenty of weird stories when it comes to Open Run. So, it was no surprise that AT&T was like, wait a minute, we have done a lot of work on this already. Are we ready to take on this task of integrating all the stuff? Not sure. Let's bring Ericsson, at the end of the day, to be, the chief of integration in this network. And, we'll monitor the situation. But, on the one hand, you have folks like Rakuten saying we can do as much as we can. Look at Boost Mobile. They started with an integrator, but then realized that, oh, wait a minute, we're not going anywhere. Let's do it ourselves. And actually, they were glad to be able to do it themselves because they learned a lot and they have, like Open Run should be providing a lot of control, full control about what's going on in the network. So now when you look around, at Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, same thing. It's a mix of doing some parts themselves and engaging with a system integrator. But the system integrators we saw at the beginning of Open Run, like NEC and Fujitsu, actually, which happen to be leading the way, they are no longer, doing good for that matter, because the service providers decided to take things back on the control. So yes, it is a big issue to make a bunch of vendors, competitors work together, but you have, Vodafone is the best example of vetting tons of RU suppliers, as well as software suppliers, chipset suppliers. This is the best example we have in the world, actually, of a large service provider saying, okay, we can do both. And let's see when we have to implement the large project that we're still waiting, the losers and the winners. But yeah, so it is still an issue.
Yeah. And, for the sake of time, I want to skip down here a bit and make sure we get to this question of cost savings, right? Because that's obviously a big one. Operators often cite TCO savings as a driver for Open RAN, but I have had some conversations with folks, most notably Boost Mobile, who said Open RAN is delivering a ton for us. But right now we're not really seeing the cost savings. I think they expect to, but I wanted to ask you, are operators actually realizing these savings at scale, or integration operations costs kind of eroding the value proposition? How do you see that?
No, it's a very long shot. Everyone told me, in fact, cost saving has totally disappeared off the map as a chief driver. Chief drivers are scalability, agility, innovation, flexibility. But cost is not, a chief driver, because those who are still doing the math are finding that OPEX are going to the roof because of the integration cost. So you get savings from the hardware and to some extent software perspective of, with hardware, for the RU, then VDU, VCU, hardware and software. So that, yes, you can achieve, a better saving than going straight to traditional RAN. But the integration is bringing lots of OPEX to the party. And it's going to take a long while to actually see some, TCO effect, or let's put it this way, return on investment. So, we have a consensus on that.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Maybe we can end with kind of look forward, over the next like 3 or 5 years or so. Do you expect Open RAN to remain niche, become mainstream, or evolve into something different altogether? I guess, what do you sort of see as the near-term future for Open RAN?
It's not going to be a niche because the adoption is increasing. And as I said, by 2030, 30% of all RAN deployments will be Open RAN. And I should be more accurate saying Open vRAN for that matter, because today, 95% of Open RAN deployments are Open Virtual RAN, because it doesn't make that much sense to not go, on virtual machine and then cloud, through containerization, which is what Rakuten Mobile did. It took a while because containers were not ready, but NTT Docomo is just in the process of moving to virtual machines. So you see, before containerization. So this is the process. And as I said, you have in every single RFP as part of this 5G contract renewal cycle, there is the Open RAN component. Everybody has to be ready. If you cannot offer Open RAN, you're out, period. So no, it's not a niche. It's, moving forward.
Okay, great. I think that's a good place to end. Stéphane, thank you so much for your time
You're
today.
very welcome.
Yeah. And
Thank you,
thank you everyone
Catherine.
for tuning in. We'll see you next week.